ago next Wednesday, Michael Scanlon was shot dead here in Thomas Street as he hid from a black and tan patrol that was seeking his recapture. He had earlier escaped from their custody at William Street RIC barracks. Michael Scanlon, along with his comrade Ty Crowley of Ballylanders, was captured at Ballinastone near Kilfinnan some days previously. Both men had been taken around to the various RIC barracks in East Limerick to confirm their identities. Many of the RIC men knew both men, but they failed to identify either man. Eventually, the very officious Sergeant Edward Kennedy, a Tipperary-born RIC man who was based at Galway, identified the two men. After the capture, the two men had spent the night in Kilmallock RIC and military barracks at Ashiel Towers. The raiding party that captured them had only one pair of handcuffs, and these were put on Crowley. Scanlon was manacled with barbed wire, and the two men were taken back to Kilmallock. A British Army NCO coming on duty the following morning considered this to be very inhumane treatment, so he cut off the wired manacles. Scanlon and Crowley were eventually taken to William Street Station in Limerick for further interrogation and processing. As Crowley was at the back of the truck and he was handcuffed, he was taken off the lorry first. While the escort was so occupied, Scanlon, who was unfettered, spotted an escape opportunity and he vaulted from the lorry before his escort could react. He then raced up Little Catherine Street and turned into Lower Thomas Street. He ran down into Gary's Bakery, which was in the basement of this building, where some bakers were working there, and they covered him with bags. As the police escort had lost sight of Scanlon, they were not sure where he had gone, so they started a systematic comb out of all the buildings in the area. When a number of police entered the downstairs bakery and inquired if a fugitive had been seen, the bakers answered in the negative. The police then returned to the street, where a woman shouted to them that he is still down there. Armed with this information, the police returned to the basement, where they discovered Scanlon and shot him from point-blank range. Michael Scanlon was mortally wounded, and although he was removed to the military hospital attached to the new barracks, he died a short time later. His remains were interred in the family grave at Castle Jane near Knocklong some days later. Michael Scanlon was a very able volunteer leader in the southeast Limerick area. He was especially close to Thomas Malone, to the extent that when Malone got married to Peg Hogan in August 1920, Michael Scanlon had stood as his best man. At the time of the attack on Kilmallock RIC barracks in May 1920, Scanlon was the OC of the local battalion, as he had taken over from Sean T. Reardon, who had been captured sometime previously. He was very involved in planning the attack, which was led by Malone. During the attack, a number of ex-British soldiers resident in Kilmallock took advantage of the chaos and mounted a predatory raid on Castle Oliver to rob and plunder the mansion. When Michael Scanlon heard about what happened, he had the perpetrators rounded up and expelled from Kilmallock. Tremendous pressure was brought to bear, especially by the clergy, to have the ex-soldiers allowed back into the town, as many of them were fathers of young families. Eventually, it seems, Michael Scanlon relented and allowed these men back into the community. It was a decision that Michael Scanlon was to regret, as it appears that it was one of those ex-soldiers acting in the role of a spotter who spied Michael Scanlon and Ty Crowley getting off the train at Kilmallock railway station. The two men had been visiting Crowley's brothers, who were dead on hunger strike in Cork. The two men were tracked to Burke's of Ballinastona, where they were arrested the following morning. They were then taken around various RIC stations in the East Limerick area to have their identity confirmed. Michael Scanlon had trained as a national school teacher, and when he was qualified, he managed to obtain a posting to a school in Kilmallock. He was one of a number of brothers from Galway who had been heavily involved in the volunteers in their own area. His older brother Jimmy was deeply involved in the setting up of the volunteers in Galway. Because of his involvement in the rescue of Sean Hogan at Knocklong, he was wounded. Jimmy Scanlon had to go on the run, along with his comrade Ned O'Brien, also of Galway. Eventually, after many trials and tribulations, Scanlon and O'Brien arrived in America, where they remained until the truce. A younger brother, Gary, was a medical student in UCC, where he was also recorded as being an active member of the college unit of the IRA. And on one occasion it seems that Gary had taken part in an IRA ambush in the morning, and in the afternoon when he went on duty in one of the hospitals, he had to attend to a number of the RIC men who had been wounded in the morning's ambush. Another brother, Peter Scanlon, was ordained to the priesthood for the American diocese, where he came in contact with photography. Whenever he was at home in Ireland, he documented a country in transition. His photographs provide a unique record of IRA training camps and the local men who took part in the struggle. He also came home on holidays at various stages and captured social life in the Galway area through the medium of his lens. Michael Scanlon's other brothers, Tad and John Jack, were also involved in the IRA, but not to the extent of their younger siblings. Michael Scanlon had taken part in a number of barracks attacks in the East Limerick area, including the attacks at Ballylanders and Kilmallock in April and May 1920. He succeeded Sean T. O'Riordan as OC in the Kilmallock area when O'Riordan was arrested in early May 1920. A unique feature about Michael Scanlon is that he is listed twice in the dress records for East Limerick. This was occasioned by the British disbanding of coroners' courts and replacing them with British military courts of inquiry. The reason for this action was that the coroners' courts did not always return the verdicts that suited the military authorities. Indeed, there are significant disparities between two sets of records on Michael Scanlon, such that a stranger reading the record would not realise that they were reading the record of one and the same man. Taken in the overall, Michael Scanlon was a dedicated Republican who essentially was a decent man and who unfortunately paid a dear price for his decency. If he had not relented and allowed the ex-soldiers back to Kilmallock, the chances are that he would have survived the conflict. Thank you.